The truth is, typically, by the third generation, everything somebody's built has been squandered and forgotten in American culture. I would rather leave my kids nothing but the proper values, the proper heritage, and the proper connection to their family and who they are.
If you're practicing IBC, you are going to leave your children wealthier than you ever were. So that bridges back to the importance of the heritage and what we leave behind. Let's channel that energy on the heritage side towards them becoming someone who money will be a force for good for them and the people around them.
What you leave in your kids is more important than what you leave to your kids. So if they don't know who they are and what it means to be a part of your family, this evil, rotten society is excited to instill their own values in your children. All right, here we are again. Same clothes, different episode.
What's up?
Just finished recording another one, so we're just hopping right into a second one, get one in the tank here for everybody. Something we wanted to talk about, we're often always talking about money, of course. That's one of the 5 F's that we occasionally talk about: faith, family, fitness, finance, and friendship. Finance being a big part of that, and that's why we specialize in that, because we really think that people need to find some sort of balance and hopefully abundance in all 5 of those areas of life. But if you are not financially abundant, or at least not financially comfortable, which is where savings can often get you to, then it's really hard to live abundantly in the other 4 areas of your life when you're always stressed about your money. So we like to keep the stress away by creating an environment of savings. But in that, since we're always talking about money, one of the things we always come down to is the inheritance aspect of this and what we're going to leave our family, and how the death benefit plays a big factor in that, and the estate planning and the multi-generational wealth. And well, that's wonderful to talk about. But the truth is, typically, by the third generation, everything somebody's built has been squandered and forgotten in American culture. And so really the inheritance, it's important. I want to leave my family with a lot of abundance. I want to leave my family with a lot of money. That's a huge goal of mine. But is it the most important thing? So today we're going to talk about heritage versus inheritance.
It's good to step back and move the focus, zooming out on just money. Of course, money is going to be at the center of our conversations, but time and what we leave behind are equally valuable. We've made the point before that if you had the option of everything we've got right now, your money, your investments, your house, everything, like, would you trade any of those for your children? Like, if you had to pick one or the other, we would all forfeit everything we have accumulated in the financial space to keep our children, right? So clearly that's more important than money. That's obvious, but we want to kind of keep helping to change paradigms that we think need to be broken or shattered, depending in not just the financial area, but in what we leave behind, as far as we're talking about in this episode. So we know that our children are more important than our money, because we would all choose them over keeping assets that we have. We also know time is invaluable. And our friends Dave and Paul on the Wealth Warehouse podcast made a good point recently. Would you trade your fortune, your net worth, your everything, everything denominated in dollars in your life, would you trade that with what Warren Buffett has? Yeah, of course. I mean, who wouldn't want billions and billions of dollars? But if that came with trading ages, would you take that deal?
Absolutely not.
So billions and billions of dollars is not worth having a few more years left with your family. Would he switch places with you? Yeah, in a heartbeat. So there are things more important than money, and that's what we want to focus on today.
Yeah, it's like there in the 70s, there was a band called Bread. I don't know if you've heard of them. They have a song called Everything I Own.
I'm younger than you. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. But in that song, like it sounds, I'm pretty sure, at least in the beginning portion of it, he's like the lyrics are written towards the parents, and it talks about like the nurturing and the bringing it up, and he says, like, I would give up everything I own to see you and touch you once again. And so when you think about your parents, like, I've lost mine, like 100%. The house I just bought, I'd sell it if I could have my parents back in my life.
Mhm.
because that's so much more important than the money and the things I've done to earn that money and the things I've spent it on. Like, who cares about all that? It's the time and the people in your life. And when it comes to children, when we're going to talk about heritage here, what you leave in your kids is more important than what you leave to your kids.
Yeah.
Without the values, without the history, without the heritage of your family. So for me, like, what does it mean to be a Moody to my kids? What does it mean to be a Tui? Do they have any idea what that means? And how do we put that thought into them?
There's a book you can go to our reading list on the website, but called "What Would the Rockefellers Do" by Garrett Gunderson. It's a common comparison that's made in our world, which is the Rockefellers versus the Vanderbilts. Both of them had ungodly fortunes, worth more than the entire U.S. economy, I believe, in the case of the Vanderbilts. But one of them had no plan. The Vanderbilts had no plan for continuing the responsible stewardship of this capital. And by, I think, the second generation, he continued to grow the fortune. And then by the third, it was almost gone, squandered on mansions that they no longer own, that might no longer be standing. And now there's no value at all to the Vanderbilt fortune. Versus the Rockefellers, which have established a family office. They put guardrails on this so that the money can't be squandered from the family trust. It can be accessed for specific purposes. But to be born into that family comes with, one, a life insurance policy as soon as you're born, which will eventually pay in back into the trust later, continuing the self-sustaining thing, which is why some people call what we do the Rockefeller method. This idea of using assets that have certainty and accessibility during one's lifetime, which then multiply and return to your family trust, like that is long-term generational thinking. That's what we want to do. We want to be Rockefeller type thinkers, not Vanderbilt type thinkers. And when we think of, trust fund baby, that is the Vanderbilt example, that you hand someone an obscene amount of money that they don't know how to manage, and then they squander it and it's gone within a few generations. We want to put guardrails in place so that that can't happen.
It's not even about the money. Like, that's not even like what I'm thinking about here. And that's important to have those guardrails, but I think there's an even more important, deeper look into that. Everybody just talks about what they did because they created a trust.
Mm-hmm.
But why did they create a trust, and what were the rules around that trust? Or I think, or what's actually more important, you know, even the Rockefellers, because they have their hands tied into like every institution in our country. They're in the education, they've manipulated the pharmaceuticals, the medical care industry, almost everything. Let me start with this. If you don't put values into your family,
Mm-hmm.
society can't wait to do it for you. So if they don't know who they are and what it means to be a part of your family, this evil, rotten society is excited to instill their own values in your children. And so think about what is taught. Be independent. Go out and make your own life. When you spread your wings as soon as you're, 18 for the vast majority of the American public, get your high school diploma, go to college, take off, make a great career. And they've created this thing where like families speak to each other electronically, but they all live in these silos around the country sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the wealthiest people want you to do that. It almost keeps everybody not poor, but average. But what do the wealthiest families do? This is actually, I think, the deeper thing that's not talked about, because everybody talks about creating a family trust. The Rockefellers are born into a family business. They have a cohesive unit that sticks together, grows together, and is interdependent on each other. The Vanderbilts didn't. Most families don't. Most families are not interdependent. And everybody knows everywhere you go, even in the shitty corporate culture we've all been a part of, whether that's a military shitty corporate culture or corporate culture, they do these dumb team building exercises. But the point of it is important, is that all of us can go further as a team. It's like, that's true. It's the way that the corporate world does it. But we've all been exposed to this stuff. Like, there's no I in team and all these little cliches, but it's 100% true. Like, you can't go as far on your own as you could with the rest of your family if they actually worked together and had the values where they want to be connected and they
Mm-hmm.
want to be a unit and they want to be interdependent on each other. I'm not saying people shouldn't be independent. They should, but they should also know that they're rooted in their family and they grow better together. And that is how you're going to create generational wealth. It isn't even about the structure of how the trust works. It's about the values that are traded, the heritage that goes from one generation to the next. And then how do we instill that? There's a thing that some folks I talk about, we talk about roots and wings, like the two aspects of what happens with most people's kids. The roots, like, and both of them can be working together, they're strong. Independently, they don't build a strong family. So roots are, you want somebody that is linked to their family, always has those roots, always has that heritage, and always has that connection. They want to be a part of the family, and they want you to be a part of their children's families. Like, do you know how many people in this world, the grandparents, like, seen their grandkids once or twice in their lives, and the grandkids are 10? It's sad. Like, it's just like there's just a complete disconnect because there's no roots, and that's weak. The other side of that, if the roots are too strong, you get people that just become dependent on their family. They can't leave, they can't fly. And so that's the wing side of it. Most of us in society, we build this idea that, like, I want my kids to be independent. I want them to be able to take care of themselves. You really hear this on the female side. I want my woman to never have to rely on a man, or my daughter to never rely on a man's paycheck. Well, I don't always think that's dumb if they're involved with a rotten man. Maybe that's because they don't have the right values or they weren't instilled well. But we create these strong wings where children want to leave the nest and fly and go be independent, and they have weak roots. So somehow, how can we have strong roots and build our children with strong wings so they can be independent, but they can also be rooted in their family, the family history, the family heritage, the family unit, and be interdependent in that way. So independence is like, it's not like this wonderful goal that everybody should be thinking about. I want my kids to be independent. Like, I want my kids to be interdependent. I want all of us to need each other and to grow together and get stronger together.
You talked about before we recorded, you have an opportunity to possibly purchase 5 acres behind the house you just purchased. And you were talking about how you want to get it because you don't want a development to come in and put 4 or 5 houses back there. But what was the one exception you said?
If they were my kids' homes.
Yeah. So like your family staying together, your family growing on this land, that is American. That's history. That's like the whole world until, like the dandelion going in the wind, a family just, you hit college, you hit 18, and then everybody just goes separate ways. And, that's how, like, my family spread out. I was in the military, so obviously I was bouncing around all over the place. But me and my two sisters, we all went to different states, and we went to different school. I went to school in Georgia. My sisters both stayed in Texas for school, but different schools. And now, we're all in different places. And it's cool right now. My youngest sister actually lives with us. We have a side unit on her house, and she was ready to, get out of San Antonio for a while, get a, break, change of scenery. And so she moved out here, and it's cool because she moved here when my older daughter was maybe 6 or 7 months old, and she's just turned 4. And then my other daughter just turned 1. And so essentially for both of my daughters' entire lives, they've lived with their aunt and of course mom and dad. But like my sister can just comes in and plays with the girls, and like that's very unique. It shouldn't be, but that is very unique in this world. I'm overseas moving around my whole life when I was a child and when I was in the military, so I'm not familiar with living in the same town my whole life. Like, I know you've been in your last house for 13 years. That's totally foreign to me. So this might be less unique to some people, but to me, the fact that my sister can come in and knows my daughters, and my daughters are going to grow up with their aunt, like that's her, my older daughter, like her best friend, she would tell you, is my sister.
That's cool.
It's really cool. And so this idea that, like, I want to, the same way that the only way you want houses on that back 5 acres is if they're your family compound, basically. Like, I want the same thing. I want my daughters and the future children, I want them to stay in the same town, in the same land. Like that is a great goal, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and let's talk, like, how do you build those values? How do you build those legacies? I think part of it is children, especially, but everybody, like stories. And, like, are we telling our family stories? Do we even know them? And if we don't, then we should have our own stories, right? Maybe your parents didn't tell you any stories about your family. Maybe they were just, like, lost to you. Maybe you were adopted and you don't have a family story, or who knows what. But that's what's going to create connection. Your children will squander the heritage you want to leave them if they don't have any connection to who they are and where they came from. Like, you've got a great one. You've got a very famous ancestor. And it's not hard for you to even find stories, even if they were written by a third party that's not part of the family, but you probably have interfamily stories about your past with on the Calhoun side anyway. I don't know about, the Tui side and everything, but we never talked about that. But, so how are we passing those stories? And then how are they learning their heritage? What traditions are we creating with our families? What kind of like sayings, if you will, or do you have? Like, are there certain things that your family can just speak to the values? I'm trying to build this in my family. I don't have this from above. So I'm trying to build this down. Like, can my family tell you who they are? What are basically the core values that we live out, and could they speak it? Like, if you always do the right thing, you'll never be wrong, even if it's hard. Like, I want my kids to know that. I want that just to be part of like Moody's, do the right thing even when it's hard. You'll never be wrong if you do the right thing. So, like those sorts of things, like how do we build these values? Because I think that's more important. I would rather leave my kids nothing but the proper values, the proper heritage, and the proper connection to their family and who they are, and no money, than leave them $10 million and no connection to us, and me have no connection to my grandchildren someday. That's meaningless. The value of those dollars, we talked about it on the last episode. Like, what's the value of a dollar? It's zero. If like
Mhm.
if I leave my grandkids millions of dollars, but they don't know who I am except a guy that sends them a Christmas card, it was meaningless. All the money was
Mhm.
absolutely meaningless. I just heard a story the other day about somebody that, rather than leaving the money for the inheritance, they send their kids and spouse on like a week trip every year, like all their children by themselves so they can get time away. And they bring all the grandkids to them, and they take their grandkids for a week and they go do all kinds of stuff. And it's like, it was like the grandkids can't wait for their week with grandma and grandpa every year.
That's really cool.
They're building this big connection, and they're blessing their children with like a nice little trip away. Like, what a cool thing, that they're building for their family. So like now their grandkids are creating this close personal connection with their grandparents that you can do on a babysitting side and like when you're super involved. But when it's like a meaningful, like, we're gonna go do this stuff, we're gonna have a week of adventure with grandma and grandpa, like that's a cool thing. Like, that's better than leaving those dollars and part of their inheritance. Like, they will talk about their grandparents their whole lives when they used to take us doing all this stuff every week, every year, 2 weeks a year, whatever it was. Like, that matters. Money doesn't. Money's going to come, money's going to go. No matter how good we are at leaving this, we're going to have an idiot in our downline, and they're going to squander it. It's going to happen. Like, there's not a family in the world that doesn't have a screwball. You know what I mean? So it's like, rather than just worry about the money, I'm just thinking about this. Like, how do we create the rhythms and the traditions in our family to create the values so that when somebody says like, "Oh, that's a Tui," they already know who that person is. That's a Tui kid, and they can make automatic assumptions on them that are good because people know your values.
Yeah, that's cool. It's funny you said that because just last night, actually, or the night before last, so my in-laws are currently at our house, my wife's parents, and they're here quite a bit in the winter because they spend about 6 7 months out west to get out of New Hampshire winter. So while they're out west, they spend a ton of time with us. So my daughters are super close with their grandparents. We're fortunate all four of their grandparents are still alive and see them regularly. But because of the proximity during the 6 months of the year that they're out here, they see my wife's parents all the time. And the other night, actually, they took my daughter on a overnight trip to a hotel. They went up to the San Diego Safari Park. They did like a children's museum and stuff. But we told our daughter about it a couple days prior, and for 3 days straight, that's all she talked about. And it was just the most adorable thing because this trip for her was like vacation. They're just gonna go, stay at a hotel and do what we went to Safari Park like 2 weeks ago. It's like nothing crazy, but for her it was the most valuable thing. So she's always gonna remember that, and getting to spend that quality time is really cool. And on the family history side, my sister that lives with us, Carolyn, is really into researching family history. She has been deep diving into both lines of our family, and pulling up news. She'll send out news clippings and stuff to our family of like wedding announcements or death announcements, local newspapers from where my dad's parents, my mom's parents, and just finding these really cool stories up the line, bringing together pictures. She has scrapbooks of both sides of our family. It's really cool and it's very unique, and it's like I want to have that, but I'm glad my sister has got the motivation to actually go and do that and spend the time to put those scrapbooks together, to put all of this information together and do the research. And so I'm really grateful that she's willing to do that, because I feel like I don't have the time to do that right now. And so it's cool that we're gonna get some of that family history there.
Yeah, believe it or not, like what we're doing right here. Imagine this. Like, imagine if and I never thought about this until there's somebody that I taught with. Their dad was like well, actually, he had a number one hit in the 50s, like a pop hit. And then, he was like a big fish in a small pond as far as a singer in Pittsburgh. Really beautiful voice, but recordings all over the place. He would record even a big stuff. But like when he passed away a few years ago, I remember her saying, like, the most amazing thing is that I have volumes and volumes of recordings of my dad singing and talking and being interviewed and all this other stuff. Like, there is so much digital existence of him because of who he was, almost 70 years ago at that point, and going forward, because he was still singing as an old man. And it's like, so even for you and I, like, our kids can go listen to these recordings and hear our voice. Like, imagine if you lost your dad today. Like, do you have a way to kind of just hear him talk to you
I save voicemails for my parents just because I
just for
know
that?
one day, yeah. And it's like, you know, it's funny. I don't know, my dad will listen to this, but he will leave a voicemail every time he calls, and it's a missed call. And like, as someone growing up with tech, like, I know that I missed the call because I see the missed call.
Yeah.
I always laugh though, because I'm not ever going to tell him, because I like having those voicemails. Dad, if you're listening, we know that you called by the fact that we see the missed call, but my voicemail is full of, hey, just tried to call you, play, like, it's really funny. I think it's like, I don't like to, I don't want to delete those, because yeah, you're right.
Someday you're not going to get that call again. Trust me. I've been there. Like, and it's
Yeah,
going to be awesome to have that.
we are passing down, kind of putting it on the record of like how we want to think about money. And one thing that I think is important right now in this discussion, and we've said it a lot before, is we don't need to keep making the same mistakes. A lot of things are shifting right now, like big paradigmatic changes in how overall, like, society functions. Like, I think some things that are kind of like the idea of college, right? We talked about that. Neither of us are very interested in our kids going to college. I think that as the idea that is held for 30 or 50 years of going to college, getting an undergrad degree is going to set you up for employment opportunities, average income is going to be higher, et cetera. I think that's totally crumbling, as it's become clear now that the value of a college degree is very, very little, especially relative to the major debt that you can incur. Like, it's much better to not have an undergraduate degree and not have student loans than to have an undergraduate degree and six figures of student loans, because that's the one type of debt that the government won't let you write off. So that idea, for instance, college, when our daughters, or when your kids are older, but you got a couple of years so you start thinking about college. If you do, I got 15 or 14 years, so I got some time. But I imagine by the time my daughters are going to college, it's not going to be the same thing where everyone is striving to go. Where your classmates are going. It's just a given that you're going to go somewhere else, to a different city, a different state, go to college, we did that, like, I don't have any, regrets on doing that, or that's how it was when we grew up. Like, I get why our parents' generations pushed us hard to go to college, because there was truth in that it did provide value. Now that that's changing, how much are we changing our planning conversation, on the financial side? Like, I'm not writing college into my plan, right? On the getting it, this idea of like spreading out all over the country to find yourself, pull yourself, do it on your own, but not learn about taxes until you're 30. I mean, maybe if you always work a W-2 job, never even know that taxes are being automatically withheld, like, until you're kind of slapped in the face with some of these realities, you're never going to learn them in school. And so we can kind of stop that now. We can change these paradigms moving forward. Like, our daughters can, finish up their teens understanding the ins and outs of like how tax code applies to us. How unique is that? How cool is that?
But everything else, even with the other five F's, when we talk about, like, we can be thinking about all that stuff around like, and I'm purposefully steering away from the money side of this, although it's
Mhm.
important, because I really believe that the heritage is more important than the inheritance. But it's awesome that they are going to learn that. But every paradigm we have, I've told a story about, like, kind of figuring out who my grandfather was. I've told that on this podcast before. when I took
Mhm.
my daughter to see my dad. And it's just like, once I recognize that, I can change that paradigm. Like my family doesn't have to repeat that behavior and that way of living in everything we do. It can be all over the place. And so talking about like stories, I was thinking something that I endeavor to do is to start journaling the stories of my life, writing it down so that as they come up, because you'll be out, like, let's say you're out walking around or you're out just doing something, you think about something that happened in your past and you might get a chuckle about it, or maybe it was a pivotal moment in your life, like that story, when my dad was passing away and he saw my daughter, and like that changed my life. That moment was a pivot point in my life. Like those stories need to be written down, and they actually, maybe fireside Fridays, like with your family, like they need to be passed. We need to tell these stories because stories give the kids the heritage and the connection to your family so they can build an identity. Because like I kind of said in the beginning, if you don't give your kids an identity, the world will. And
Mhm.
the last thing you want is your kids to be some tranny that the world
Hmm.
wants to make them. Like,
Yeah.
give your kid an identity, let them know who they are. And I think that's going to be done through stories and through the values. And so actually, like, going through this, I kind of wrote down some of the things that I'm thinking, like, that I want to become almost like mantras, like where we can just, through my children's upbringing, you can just say things. And these matter. Like, sayings are so important. Like, rethink your thinking. How often does that come across your desk or across your mind?
Mhm.
Nelson Nash is one of his principles: rethink your thinking. Outside of the money stuff of that, just rethink your thinking. And like, if you constantly hear that, if every time you talk to Nelson Nash and you brought up a question to him and he said you need to rethink your thinking, I bet you his kids, like, constantly that comes to them. That comes front of mind to them. They're like, rethink your, what did dad always say? Rethink your thinking. And it becomes a
Yeah.
thing of who that, the Nash family is. Like, they rethink their thinking. They reattack everything that's going on. So that's a phenomenal one. And I wrote down like a few for me, like just little things that I want my kids to believe it's what we do as a family. Like, Moody's finish things they start. We leave things better than where they started, and that's all things. We leave our home better, we leave relationships better, we leave like the sports scene better, we leave our body better. Like, everything we do in life, we leave it better. I think relationships is the most one there. Like, are you bringing value to a relationship that you're in? And if not, like, how can you? That should always
Mhm.
be a question that I want my kids asking. So thinking about some of this stuff, they always do the right thing. If it doesn't point to Jesus, what's the point? I want my kids to start thinking about that. Like, I just wrote these down, so these are things I want to start implementing. Like I said in the beginning, you never go wrong doing what's right, no matter how hard it is. Rethink your thinking. And these are ones that I just kind of want to like talk through with my kids and start bringing this into our everyday kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say vernacular, but just like who we are. Like, Moody's support each other
Mhm.
all the time. Because sibling squabbling is happening in my house. The whole teenage thing of like, they're always like mad at each other and yelling at each other. But like, you know what? When it really comes down to it, this is your brother, this is your sister, and we're always going to support each other. And I know that you're going to be at each other's throats as teenagers. It's normal, but we always support each other in the things that really matter. We do hard things. We build others up. We believe in hard work. We believe in second chances. Just things I'm thinking about, like the values and so the stories of our past, these values and sayings that I want to be a part of my family so that they are connected to this family, become interdependent, build strong roots and wings. And someday when I leave them an inheritance, they have a heritage. Because they don't have a heritage, they're going to squander the inheritance.
Yeah.
That's the stuff I've been thinking about.
I don't like the idea of the world influencing them and trying to put those ideas in. I do like the idea of being conscious of that. And that's something that we're, now that our daughter's 4, and obviously we know she's listening, and like a week later she'll say something and we forgot that we even said it. And we're like, how did you learn that word? What are you even talking about? And we remember that we said that, a week ago, a month ago, whatever. And we just have this like little brilliant 4-year-old who's picking up every single thing around her, good and bad.
Everything. It's crazy, isn't it?
And yeah. And so, we're in California, and so there's a lot of things that we're going to shield her from. I'm not going to let the world influence her. And like you said, they have an agenda if we let them. And the first thing that came to my mind was the world's a vampire. Like there are vampires, energy vampires out there. They want to influence them. They desperately want them to be dependent on them. All of these ideas, like this women's empowerment movement, this idea that your best value is in going to school and getting a job. It's like, it's just a job. Like it's not fulfilling in and of itself. We want to do, we want to be doing this business without ever retiring it from it because we do love it and find fulfillment in this. But this is different than just a job. Like just the idea that having a job is a pedestal to get to that means you're strong. And it's like, I don't want my daughters exposed to that mindset. It's like if they want to go find employment that is fulfilling to them, like that's different than this kind of pinnacle idea that I just having a job is the best thing I can do and having a family is going to degrade that. It's like, it's such a destructive way of thinking through things. And so I don't want the vampires out there putting those ideas into my daughter's head. And so we're going to homeschool, but we're even noticing, we notice if she spends time with friends, we can kind of gauge, like if she's away from us for some time, we start seeing some behavioral things or something that, like, where did you hear that? Who said that? And we have to really start now focusing on what we're saying, because she's always around us, but it's just, you can't escape a lot of it. And I'm not just saying she's just going to be like blindfolded, but like, I want to not be passively letting her absorb things without saying, here's what we believe. I don't care what all of your friends say. I don't care what this, I mean, she's not gonna have teachers in that sense, but like, yeah, you might have seen this somewhere, but we do not believe that in our family. That is not part of our values. And this is not how we are going to raise you. And it gets back to what I said about not having to keep learning the same lesson. I think that the typical career path that it was pushed on us by necessity because our parents wanted us to succeed and be strong on our own. Like I see the value of that, but I think it's gone too far. And I think it's particularly gone far with girls who think that their value, or women who think their value is like just finding a job, some job where you make money. It's like, no, like I'll make the money. Like I want, I'm very, very traditional, and I'm finding that it's so much more fulfilling to know that like I am providing so that my wife can be with the two people who depend on her every second of the day. And where we live, it's a super wealthy community. And so, we're kind of fish out of water here, but a lot of, we go to the playground and there's a lot of just nannies. So you'll have like a Mexican nanny with a kid, barely speaks English. The nannies are just sitting there talking, chatting to each other while the kids are on the playground. It's like, that's invaluable time. Like that's where the kids are learning and growing and social skills. And so like, I'm not like a shadow on my daughter, but like I'm kind of following her around, playing with her, helping her, like just being with her, and she knows I'm there. And I just can't imagine the idea of like, okay, Lupe, just bring her back in 8 hours, and here's some money for it. It's like, that's so unfathomable to me. But where we live, that is, I mean, almost everyone has a nanny. It's kind of a culture shock to me, but it's also reaffirmed. We want nothing to do with that. And whatever I need to do to provide so that my wife can be the primary caretaker of our daughters, because those vampires are coming. They're there. Like they're right outside the door all the time.
And yeah, and like I said, if you don't take the proper steps and the proper care, the proper time, the proper love to make sure that your children have an identity in your family and in who they are, those vampires would love to give them an identity, and it's probably not one you want them to have.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got to be like strongly grounded in what they believe, who your family is, their faith. And that's why I love that one. If it doesn't point to Jesus, what's the point? Because it is just such a phenomenal barometer of like, is this worthy or is it not? And if they believe that to their core, and they believe in all the other family values we have about hard work, supporting each other, being kind to one another, all the things that I want my kids to think about, and I know you want your kids to think about, like they can reject those vampires, and the world won't give them an identity because everybody's starving for one. Everybody wants to have an identity, and you see it. I've seen it in some of our circles. It's just like the guy that challenges all authority, and like I remember there was this guy I worked with. His nickname was Bulldog, and like he became the guy that was always going to like fight the battle until it became who he was, not because I think it's really who he was, but it's who he became because people were like, yeah, somebody had to say it. You know what I mean? And I remember it was just like, in reality, it probably, because it was a brilliant dude, probably stunted his career, because you can't have somebody that's always like trying to fight everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And like you
Yep.
see that. So it's like everybody's starving for an identity. And if you don't take steps to help your children understand who they are and what their identity is wrapped around that heritage aspect, like the world's going to give them the one that hopefully doesn't destroy them and your family, but it's going to give them one.
Yeah. I know that I've been steering into tying this into finance, and you've been steering us back on course with talking about heritage. But I want to go into a financial point and combine these two ideas, because we talk about, you've heard, it's not our idea, we've probably heard it a bunch of times, that money just amplifies who you are. If you're a greedy, if you have no morals and no values and you get a ton of money, you're just going to become a wealthier person doing that. Like if you're a good person and you're going to get a ton of money, like the money doesn't change you, the money amplifies what you already are. And so let's think about this. If you're practicing IBC, you are going to leave your children wealthier than you ever were, because everything you have, the fortune that you build, whatever that amount of wealth is, plus if you were doing IBC and you have these monster insurance policies because they've grown, like, getting into how IBC works, or policies grow over time. If I live into my 80s, my death benefit is 10x what it is on my policy right now, right? So not only am I going to leave them the rental properties, the cash, all these different assets, all these dollar accounts, and I'm also going to leave them the death benefit, which is multiple times what I put in. So therefore, I mean, I suppose there's a scenario where it's not the case, but if you're doing IBC, like your children will have more money than you. You're going to pass on. Like my daughters are going to be multimillionaires. They're like, even if I die today, right? They're going to have, without even putting numbers on it, like if I just live a normal life and then my wife and I pass, like my daughters are going to have tens of millions of dollars. That's going to happen. If I die today, my wife dies today, they're going to have like $10 million, not tens, but 10, right? So we are going to leave them with an amplification of what they already are. Whether we pass today or in 40 years, we are going to leave them a huge sum of money. And like I just said, that will not change them, but just magnify who they already are. So
Oh yeah.
when you think about what they are right now, what you want them to be, and then imagine whatever they are when that inevitability hits of your passing, and they're inheriting tax-free tons of money relative to what you have, expand who they already are. So that bridges back to the importance of the heritage and what we leave behind, because at any moment we could go, like I said, when we recorded last week, neighbor 2 houses down lost their 41-year-old son, drunk driver, right? We don't know when we're going to go. Who you leave your kids, how we have this legacy conversation, how we have this heritage conversation, how your kids think about what it means to be a Moody, what it means to be a Tui, whatever they are right now, you're just going to amplify. Let's channel that energy on the heritage side towards them becoming someone who money will be a force for good for them and the people around them, because it's going to happen that they will be wealthier than us.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good tie up. And I'll wrap it up with this, like, figure out what direction you want to go, set your rudder, and constantly adjust your trim tab, because it's going to need it. And based on the environments you're in, the exposures your family has, and as your values even potentially shift, it's just set that rudder now and set it when they're young. And even if your children are older, it's not too late. You can reconnect and reestablish and just have these, at this point, adult conversations about it. It's never too late to start, right? To build that heritage, even if you feel like you've lost time and your kids are 20 something and they are in that phase where like they come home for Christmas, and that's all you get to see them. It's probably not what you want. So it's not too late to reignite that and rebuild the heritage
Mm-hmm.
for them and the next generation. And just like we talked about, we want our kids to have strong roots and strong wings, and we want them to be interdependent. We want heritage, and what we always talk about, we want to leave a massive inheritance. This isn't a versus, even though we called it that in the beginning. We want strong heritage and strong inheritance, because that'll create even a stronger heritage going forward and a stronger family unit. So like you said, that'll amplify a good heritage for the next
Mm-hmm.
generation, the next generation, the next generation. But I think the heritage is more important than the inheritance.
Yeah.
Who we leave behind and what we put in our kids is more important than what we leave to our kids.
Yep. If you had to pick one, focus on heritage. But since you will leave both if you're doing infinite banking, make sure that the heritage piece is sealed up first.
Yeah. And if you want to leave them in inheritance, please call us because we'd be happy to help you do that.
Yeah. Create a tax-free estate where one doesn't currently exist.
All right, man. That was a good talk. It was nice to get off the normal beaten path and venture out into something different. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. All right.
All right.
Cheers.
Talk to you.